Oh, you're here. Good. I was hoping for company. You see, I've got stories, dark ones, chilling ones, the kind that keep you up at night. Mythical creatures, curses, horrors you can't escape. Shall we begin? Don't worry, I won't bite. Much.
Bray was a humble young man who lived in a small village at the foot of a remote mountain. He made a living by chopping wood for others and had some basic knowledge of medicinal herbs. Due to the shortage of labor in the village, his elder brother Jay and his sister-in-law Sue often hired him to help gather herbs or tend to the mountain fields. One early morning, as usual, Bray set off into the mountains with Sue, while his brother stayed behind to tend to other affairs. The mountain path was steep and the humid air made the journey exhausting. Sue soon became breathless. As they approached a ravine, she suddenly said she needed to relieve herself and told Bray to wait for her along the forest path. He busied himself searching for useful herbs nearby while reminding her to be careful of venomous insects and snakes. A long while passed. Suddenly a sharp scream pierced through the forest. Bray's heart tightened. He dashed toward the source of the sound, pushing through ancient trees entwined with vines. At last, on a slope, he saw Sue. Her face was deathly pale, and she clutched a machete tightly in her trembling hands. Her clothes were splattered with blood, and at her feet lay the corpses of two massive snakes, both decapitated, though their bodies still twitched faintly. Sue's voice was hoarse as she stammered, They suddenly lunged at me, hissing like they were going to bite. I panicked and swung my blade. She was still visibly shaken. Bray felt a chill down his spine but didn't think too much of it. After all, venomous snakes were common in the mountains, and slashing at them in fear was not unheard of. They hurriedly gathered their herbs and firewood before making their way back home. The next morning, Bray went to his brother's house as usual to help out. However, the house was eerily quiet. Normally, his brother and sister-in-law would have already started their daily routines at dawn, but today there was no sound at all. He knocked on the door and called out, but no one responded. The door was slightly ajar. Bray pushed it open, and a putrid stench of blood rushed at him, nearly making him vomit on the spot. His brother and sister-in-law lay sprawled on the ground in a pool of blood. Their heads were missing. The room was in complete disarray. Bray's face turned ashen. Panic surged through him, and he immediately ran to report the gruesome scene to the local authorities. Yet, to his horror, he quickly became the prime suspect. Rumors spread that he had harbored illicit feelings for his sister-in-law and had killed his brother in a fit of jealousy. Desperate, Bray vehemently protested, "I would never harm them. Could this have something to do with the snake Sue killed yesterday?" But tales of vengeful serpents sounded absurd, and few believed him. The county magistrate arrived with his officers to investigate. Inside the house, they discovered an unusual blood trail. It was as if something wet and slippery had been dragged across the floor, leaving a winding, sinister smear leading out into the yard. The blood was dark and thick, emitting a nauseating stench. Following the trail, the officers traced it all the way to an ancient well behind the village. The well was centuries old, its stone walls cracked and covered in moss. Strange, indistinct carvings adorned its rim. The area around it was overgrown with weeds, and villagers rarely approached it. The officers examined the well's edge and found more bloodstains, along with marks that resembled something slithering into the darkness below. The well's depths were pitch black and unknowable. The magistrate's face darkened. Finally, he ordered, "Lower a bucket and search the well." A few strong laborers secured a rope and began lowering a wooden bucket into the abyss. Moments later, a terrified voice echoed from below, "Pull it up! Pull it up now!" The officers hauled up the bucket with all their might. When it emerged, its contents sent shivers down everyone's spines. The wooden pail was filled with putrid, congealed blood, and at the very bottom lay two severed human heads, Wang Shi and Sue. Their faces were frozen in sheer terror, as if they had been brutally decapitated in the midst of unimaginable horror. But the most chilling sight was what lay beneath them. 2 massive, headless snake corpses. Their swollen bodies were covered in eerie, dark markings. One officer gasped, "Aren't those the same snakes Sue killed yesterday? How did they end up at the bottom of this well? And why are the heads here?" A heavy silence fell upon the crowd. Even the magistrate took a few cautious steps back, his face as pale as a sheet. The sheer eeriness of the scene defied logic. Bray's legs gave out and he collapsed to the ground. He recalled Sue's terrified expression when she had killed the snakes. He remembered how the decapitated creatures had continued to writhe, as if refusing to die. A deep, icy fear settled into his bones. After deliberation, the magistrate finally declared, "The heads have been recovered, proving the killer was someone, or something else. While Bray remains a suspect, what lies in the well is beyond human capability. There is no evidence to convict him." Though Bray was cleared of suspicion, no one could explain how the snakes and severed heads ended up in the well, entwined as if cursed. Some claimed it was the work of vengeful spirits. Others whispered that the snakes had possessed some dark sorcery, taking revenge on their killers. The truth, however, remained an enigma. From that day on, villagers avoided the well at all costs. No one dared to approach it, especially at night. It was said that on moonless nights, eerie rustling noises could be heard from its depths, as if something was still writhing below. Some who dared to peer into the darkness swore they saw 2 swollen, monstrous snakes staring up from the abyss. Their grotesque bodies coiled together, and on their backs 2 pale, ghostly faces could be seen, featureless yet brimming with overwhelming hatred. This gruesome legend became known as the Curse of the Ancient Well. Overcome with fear and the weight of the village's judgment, Bray eventually left and never returned.